All praise, all glory, all honors most certainly due to the Most High, the God of the patriarchs Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And peace to you in the name of Jesus. This is your brother Israel of the household of faith. And I always count it truly a blessing each and every single time that I can come before you to preach the word of God. Today's lesson I want to deal with today, which is a day that it's a national holiday. It's a day that commemorates the life of one of the greatest, in my opinion, the greatest orator this country has ever produced, and none other than Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who, let me say in the onset, I believe was indeed sincere, had a sincere love for his people, and was willing to put his livelihood, his freedom, and his life on the line for the struggle of so-called Negroes in this country. Okay, today we have a dearth or famine of true leadership amongst our people. Okay, and he was an individual that was indeed sincere and had a sincere love for his people. Okay, so let me say that before I get into the program of integration that he put forth. Okay, before I do that, I want to touch upon some of the comments that were said recently by the commander-in-chief, by the president of these United States concerning Haiti. And as when he called it, as one of my good sisters said, he called it a dung hole. Well, you know, it just speaks how everybody's up in arms about what he did. It just speaks to the hypocrisy of America and America's true inability to look at itself for what it is. And that's a racist country. And it has been that way since its inception. Okay? And this country, you know, the narrative, you know, the Declaration of Independence, we hold these truths to be self-evident. You know, talk about life, liberty, the pursuit of all happiness, men being created equal. Okay? Now they were influenced and inspired, you know, by ideology and beliefs from Europe. Okay? And Haiti, more so than any other nation on the globe, and as far as a fight for independence, epitomized those beliefs of liberty. You have a nation that was established by slaves, those who were deprived life, liberty, were deprived basic human rights, rose up and defeated some of the strongest countries at the time, because they went against France and other countries in Europe. Okay, so Haiti is the epitome of the ideals that you find in France. Okay, ideals that were reported by the Declaration of Independence, and you see in the common narrative of the United States. So when he called it a dung hole, everybody's up in arms. But my question is, why aren't you up in arms based on the continued policy toward Haiti, the U.S. policy toward Haiti? Let me just go over some things. Okay. So first off, the one who wrote the Declaration of Independence was dead set against Haiti being a nation, and was frightened by, as was most of the slave holding population in the United States and throughout the world, were frightened because you had an uprising among slaves. Okay. So in 1804, you know, the Haitian Revolution succeeded, and DC rather, they went against, and they even refused to acknowledge Haiti. They refused to acknowledge Haiti's existence. Give me 1 second, brothers and sisters. My computer's acting funny. Okay. They refused to to acknowledge it, and prior even gave ammunition and arms to the French in order to fight them. Okay, that's worse than calling it a dung hole. Okay, in 1893, Frederick Douglass, this is after it's been established, they still don't like Haiti. United States still hated Haiti, and he said, Haiti is black, and we have not yet forgiven Haiti for being black. That's as far as relations between the United States and Haiti. In 1915, Woodrow Wilson, who was one of the most racist presidents, right, who had racial segregation in D.C., sent U.S. Marines to Haiti. Okay, and they said it was necessary because Haitians had, and I quote, an inherent, this is but from the Secretary of State at the time, he said they had an inherent tendency to revert to savagery. Now you're talking about some people who enslaved other people, branded people on their face, cut off parts of people's bodies, dismembered people, sold children. You had even U.S. presidents who did this. But they're the savages in Haiti. Yes, they were going through problems like most countries go through problems. Did not this country go through a civil war where thousands and thousands of men were killed? Even after this, during the Cold War, the United States gave money and supported brutal dictators in Haiti. And then they went on to get Aristide, who was truly for the people, got him out of the country, literally kidnapped him, put him on a plane, took him to be exiled. And then when you look at, because again, that's worse than calling Haiti a dung hole. And then on top of that, when a lot of the immigrants from Haiti, look how the immigrants from Haiti were treated when they came to places like Florida as opposed to other people. Racial discrimination. See, so you can even look at Clinton's engagement in Haiti. It was not on the up and up. So when you look at things, he said those things according to some, and that's bad. Because if you really want to be honest, America's on its way to being a dung hole, if you will. Only difference is one thing America has, it still has that military might. But if you take notice and not so much focus on the city on a hill narrative, you'll understand that in many factors that measure progress, the United States is falling behind. And amongst the developed countries, as far as education, America is falling behind. You look at infant and maternal mortality rates, America is falling behind. When you look at healthcare, America is falling behind. When you look at infrastructure, America is falling behind. When you look at racial tension and racial relations, America is in turmoil right now. When you look at leadership, America is in turmoil. When you look at issues of morality, America is on the decline. Like I said in a previous message, you can't kill 60 million babies through abortion and think God, you can't stand up there and say, and God bless you and God bless America. Judgment is coming. It's crumbling as I'm speaking to you. You can't be the hub of every sexual perversion and then say, God bless you and God bless America. You can't have immense poverty, not just even amongst Black people, but amongst people in general in a country where there's so much wealth. This is not, no disrespect to people who live in Bolivia, but this is not Bolivia. See, this is not Rwanda. This is not a poorer country that doesn't have all the immense wealth, but the wealth is held in the hands of very few. I was listening to something today that was talking about how, you know, people are fighting to increase minimum wage to different places, $15 and so forth. If minimum wage was where it should be, you'd be making $30 an hour. People going to work, working full time and on food stamps. Look at the country. Look at the urban areas in this country. Look at some of the rural areas in this country. It's not progressing. And then you got somebody talking about we're gonna go back to coal. You're going backwards. You're going backwards. But again, America has an inability to truly deal with herself. And I want to read something to you here. These are the words. See, because quite frankly, what we're going to do in this lesson, we're going to deal with why we're in the situation we're in. It's real simple. And what we need to do to get out of it. See, you had one who came. Again, Dr. King, who came and was a leader of the people, who was influenced by Gandhi's movement. It was in civil disobedience. Who he looked at Gandhi, and who Gandhi got the ideas from Thoreau. And while that sounds good, people don't understand. Our people in particular don't understand that we are in a peculiar situation. The situation is that we have a problem directly with our God. And that problem, that disconnect between God and his people, because we are the children of God. We are his chosen people, but we went astray and severed the relationship between the God whom we made a covenant with, and as a result, we've been cast into slavery. We've caught hell everywhere we are scattered on the planet. And although he was sincere, the program of integration was a terrible program. I'll say that again. The program of integration was a terrible program. And he came to some realization just prior to his death. You know, when this man of peace who was stabbed, had his house blown up, spent time in prison, had his life threatened, COINTELPRO, the FBI sending letters to him, encouraging him to end his own life. This man was under intense pressure. He wasn't trying to make money off of racism. He was sincere, unlike many of the leaders today. But he said something to Harry Belafonte prior to his death, prior to getting killed in 1968 at the Lorraine Motel. He said, Harry Belafonte said he looked agitated and preoccupied, and when he asked him what the problem was, he responded, "I've come upon something that disturbs me deeply." He said, "We have fought hard and long for integration, as I believe we should have, and I know that we will win, but I have come to believe we're integrating into a burning house." A burning house. And I can't say that he meant it this way, but when I think of America and the impending judgment that is coming, yeah, you got to think about who set it on fire. When you look at empires and how they crumble, who caused it? The Most High is the one that does that. But he said something. He was wrong. He says, Harry Belafonte asked him, "What should we do?" Dr. King told him that he said, "must become the firemen. Let us not stand by and let the house burn." No. first of all, I want to, before I go any further with that, I want to point out how integration has underdeveloped Black America. Now, this is from an article, Black Wealth Stagnated or Declined After Integration. It says, during segregation, Blacks were forced to start and support the businesses in their own communities. Now, understand, at this time, they were in Jim Crow South, or they were in a segregated North. As Malcolm said, you in the South as long as you below the Canadian border. Okay? So it said many of these businesses flourished and even helped made some Black communities, such as Greenwood community in Tulsa, Oklahoma, often called Black Wall Street, wealthier than their white neighbors. And you see what they did. See, that's what I'm saying. Even that, we can sit here and say we want to get together and start businesses. But I'm here to tell you, anything you do, if it's not going to work. It is not going to work. We've tried everything. So many of these neighborhoods, these businesses, you saw what they did to Tulsa. They set it on fire. First of all, they looted the homes, set them on, many of them on fire with people running out, they shot them. Then when the men in the community, they took them and locked them all up. And only let people out when they basically white people asking them to come to work and different things like that. They basically had like a concentration camp. Look it up. In Tulsa, Oklahoma, where they locked them all up and they had to walk around with information, like in apartheid South Africa. But it said after segregation ended, African Americans flocked to support businesses owned by whites and other groups. And that's what you have today. It says, causing Black restaurants, theaters, insurance companies, banks, etc., to almost disappear. See, that's why we don't have wealth. Ultimately, we don't have wealth because we sin against God. Because even when you had these businesses, as a people, we didn't have a whole lot of wealth, but we had a better mindset than we have now. It says today, Black people spend 95% of their income at white-owned businesses. Once a dollar goes into the Black community, it's out. Even in our own communities, we don't own the businesses in our own communities. We will let immigrants from other countries set up raggedy stores and run gas stations, nail shops, treat us like garbage, and give them all of our money. Men leave out of there with weave in our head like we in the sky, not men, but women. Well, even now today, some men leaving out with weave in their head, nails done, and pocketbook empty. Looking like you in disguise. Nevertheless, it says even though the number of Black firms has grown 60.5% from 2002 to 2007, they only make up 7% of all U.S. firms and less than 0.005% of all U.S. business receipts. 0.005% of all U.S. business receipts. Listen to this. In 1865, just after emancipation, 476,748 free Blacks, 1.5% of U.S. population owned a 0.005% of the wealth, of the total wealth of the United States. Okay? Today, of 435 years after the abolition of slavery, 44.5 million Black Americans, that's 14% of the population, possess a meager 1% of the national wealth. When you're talking about wealth, we own 1% of the national wealth. Compare that to the people who call themselves Jews today. We know the true Jews were Black. The true Jews, the true Israelites, were cursed by God. That's why he says in Revelation, I know the blasphemy of them would say they are Jews and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. Another thing, Black family structure collapsed after integration. It says from 1890 to 1950, Black women married at a higher rate than white women. despite a consistent shortage of black males due to their higher mortality rate. I'm going to say that again. From 1890 to 1950, black women married at higher rates than white women. See, in a lot of ways, we're going backwards. According to a report released by the Washington, D.C.-based think tank Urban Institute, the state of the African-American family is worse today than it was in the 1960s, 4 years before President Johnson passed the Civil Rights Act. In 1965, only 8% of childbirths in the black community occurred out of wedlock. I'm going to read that again. In 1865, only 8% of childbirths in the black community occurred out of wedlock. Now, in 2010, the figure was 41%. And today, out of wedlock childbirths in the black community is an astonishing 72%. This was a couple of years ago. I've read it higher than that. I'll read something else to you. It says, it says researchers Heather Ross and Isabel Sawhill argue that marital stability is directly related to the husband's relative social economic standing and the size of the earnings difference between men and women. Instead of focusing on maintaining black male employment to allow them to provide for their families, Johnson passed the Civil Rights Act with full affirmative action for women. The act benefited mostly white women and created a welfare system that encouraged removal of the black male from the home. See, our homes are totally destroyed. Welfare destroyed. Really, people don't understand. They keep talking about Trump, you know, and trust me, I'm not an advocate of any of these political systems. To me, they're the two heads of the same two-headed snake. When it comes to black people, some of the worst policies came out of the Democratic platform and their program. Mass incarceration, you got that under Democrats. Social welfare state that really literally destroyed the black family, you got that out of Democrats. It says many black men were also dislodged from their families and pushed into the rapidly expanding prison industrial complex that developed in the wake of rising unemployment. See, because they had, and again, you see this develop under Republicans, their response, particularly under Nixon, their response to black protests was benign neglect, just ignore it. And that's the policy you see today. See, one thing people talk about President Barack Obama, one thing, he kept that going. There was no, man, black people, you said, so you saw concerted efforts specifically for immigrants, particularly of Latin America. You saw concerted efforts, particularly for the gay community, LGBTQ community. You did not see specific concerted efforts to help black people. And people say, well, he got to be the president of all people. No, because everybody else, that's one thing about it. When they want something, they fight for themselves. Only Negroes could be tricked and bamboozled into thinking that everybody else's fight is your fight. It's not. See, when it comes to you, see, they want to put you on the front line and they fight. They get you at the airport protesting with them. But you the same one that when you dying in the streets with police brutality and these race soldiers, they're nowhere to be found. But they want to put you on the front line. One thing I will say about black people have historically been the main people who went up against oppression, period, in this country. Nevertheless, it says since integration, the unemployment rate of black men has been spiraling out of control. In 1954, white men had a 0% unemployment rate, while African Americans experienced a 4% rate. By 2010, it was at 16.7% for black men compared to 7.7% of white men. And let me say this. The unemployment rate, oftentimes, you see, is not accurate. A lot of people aren't counted. People who stop looking for work, unemployed. A lot of people, They're just not counted in those numbers. Secondly, when you look at the employment population ratio, you understand the situation. You go to these urban areas around the country, it's upwards of close to 50% amongst our young people, and towards that amongst Black people, period. Black males in particular. Let's go to, it says, myth of a colorblind society propagated by immigration. You know, this whole idea, I don't see color. The civil rights movement pushed for laws that would create a colorblind society where people would not be restricted from access to education, jobs, voting, travel, public accommodations, or housing because of race. However, legislation has been ineffective in eradicating white privilege. This is Michael K. Brown, professor of politics at the University of California, Santa Cruz, and co-author of Whitewashing Race, The Myth of a Colorblind Society, says in the U.S., the color of one's skin still determines success or failure, poverty or affluence, illness or health, prison or college. Colorblind policies that treat everyone the same, no exceptions for the historically oppressed and disenfranchised, are often used to argue against corrective policies such as affirmative action. See, America owes a great debt to Black people. But colorblindness, it says today, merely boasts of the unfair advantages that color-coded practices enable white Americans to accumulate over a very long time. And lastly, it says Black community became dependent after integration. African Americans have appealed to the descendants of our oppressors to fight to right their ancestors' wrongs, pay us sufficient wages to take care of our families, educate our children, and police our neighborhoods. As a result, only 2% of all working Black Americans work for another Black person within their own neighborhood. Because of this, professionally trained Black people provide very little economic benefit to the Black community. See, everybody about an individual as opposed to the collective. The Black median household income is about 64% that of whites, while the Black median wealth is about 16% of that of whites. Millions of Black children are being miseducated by people who don't care about them, and they are unable to compete academically with their peers. At the same time, the criminal justice system has declared war on young Black men with policies such as stop and frisk and 3 strikes. Marcus Garvey warned about this, saying, lagging behind in the van of civilization will not prove our higher abilities. Being subservient to the will and caprice of progressive races will not prove anything superior in us. Being satisfied to drink of the dregs from the cup of human progress will not demonstrate our fitness as a people to exist alongside other people. But when of our own initiative, we strike out to build industries, governments, and ultimately empires, then and only then will we as a race prove to our Creator and to man in general that we are fit to survive and capable of shaping our own destiny. But I'm here to tell you, what they do to Marcus Garvey, they deported Marcus Garvey. They put him in prison, they deported him. Because what he said was, first of all, he led the greatest mass movement of Black people ever. Okay, they don't talk about him. And what he was talking about, they said, well, he was just trying to go back to Africa. Listen, he never set foot on the African continent. He had those ships in particular. The main reason was to do trade, which is how wealth is built. Trade and commerce amongst other nations. But again, you had these men like King, like Garvey, like Malcolm, like Nerga, like W.B. Du Bois, but they, Booker T. Washington, Frederick Douglass, they addressed the problem in their own ways, but understand we have a peculiar situation. So it's like if a doctor, if he's treating you for an illness or for a disease, if he doesn't know how to treat it, you won't be cured. Now he can give you some things that would deal with some of the symptoms, but it's not a cure. And that's what affirmative action is. That's what Pan-Africanism was. That's what Black nationalism was. That's in the sense that, because I believe we are a nation within a nation, but we the nation of Israel, which again, that's a peculiar situation. But if you're looking at affirmative action, these programs that are put forth, right? Some even deal with socialism, black Marxism, all these things. These are simply, brothers and sisters, are not cures. They are dealing with symptoms of a larger problem. Our problem is not that we need to go and sit on a toilet next to white people. Our problem is not even that we need to go to their schools. Our problem is that we have a problem with our God. So let's look at that problem. Let's look at the situation. Let's go to the scriptures. This is Deuteronomy. This is Deuteronomy chapter 28 and verse 15. See, because here is prophesied of what was to happen to God's chosen people if they turned their backs on him, if they became disobedient. It says in Deuteronomy 28 and 15, it says, but it shall come to pass, thou wilt not hearken unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to observe to do all his commandments and his statutes which I command thee this day, that all these curses shall come upon thee and overtake thee. So what is going to come upon you? Curses. It says, cursed shalt thou be in the city, and cursed shalt thou be in the field. Wherever you go, you're going to be cursed. 17. Cursed shall be thy basket and thy store. Cursed shall be the fruit of thy body and the fruit of thy land, the increase of thy kind and the flocks of thy sheep. So economically, you'll be cursed. Your seed or your children will be cursed. Verse 28. It says, the Lord shall smite thee with madness and blindness and astonishment of heart. So you're going to go through turmoil. And you're going to have mental anguish because of this. And it says, and thou shalt grope as at noonday as the blind gropeth in darkness, and thou shalt not prosper in thy ways. And that's what we're doing. We are doing as a people. We sit around in conferences and lectures trying to find out we talk about the problem, and amen when something is said clever, that is clever, or somebody with some rhetorical skill can lead us anywhere. We're looking for a leader, but we don't understand the problem. The problem is spiritual. The problem is the problem that we have with our God. So it says, thou shalt not prosper in thy ways, and thou shalt be only oppressed and spoiled evermore, and no man shall save thee. See, you looking for a man to save you, but the men that have come, they haven't saved you. Even to this very day, we're still in captivity. You don't have a nation. You even we'll find even your own identity. Let's see what's going to happen to you while under this curse, I should say. It says, thou shalt betroth a wife, and another man shall lie with her. What is that talking about? Her stepping out on you and committing adultery? No. It's talking about your wife being raped, taken from you. It says, thou shalt build an house, and thou shalt not dwell therein. Thou shalt plant a vineyard, and shalt not gather the grapes thereof. So you will do all this building. You look at even just here in the United States. I talked about Haiti earlier. Because of slavery in Haiti, Haiti was an extremely rich colony for the French, particularly because of sugar. They built again. France was built on the backs of slaves, just like the United States, just like many of the European countries. And the form of slavery in Haiti was so brutal. They would just work you to death. It was more brutal than it was even in the United States. So it says, your wives will be raped. If you even look at similar types of sexual debauchery that were going on in the United States were going on in Haiti. And even so much so they had just like here, they had a whole class of mulattoes, mulatto prostitutes. They had all type of things that were going on, which goes along when you have an institution of slavery. It says in verse 32, thy sons and thy daughters shall be given unto another people. So your children will be sold from you. That's just like The joy of truth in that speech. Ain't I a woman? I believe that's 1849, if I'm not mistaken, she gave that speech. And she talked about how she had all these kids and they were all sold into slavery and nobody heard her cries with the Lord. So he said, thy sons and thy daughters shall be given unto another people. And then it says, just like what she said, and thine eyes shall look and fare with longing for them all the day long, and there shall be no might in thine hand. See, our situation is one of such, you have a lot of our people, you even question God. Why has God allowed this to happen? Because if you will not hearken to the voice of the Lord our God to serve, to do all his commandments and his statutes, that's why our disobedience, not because we're inferior to these people. These people, in particular Europeans, are the last people on the planet to be civilized. And when you talk about Western civilization, it's really Western barbarity, where they spread all over the earth and brought hell to everywhere. And that's just history. People might get offended by that, but that's just history. So it said, thy sons and thy daughters shall be given unto another people. Verse 37, and thou shalt become an astonishment, a proverb, and a byword among all nations, whither the Lord shall lead thee. Man, when you think, do research just on the names that we've been called. We a byword and a proverb that was a joke or saying about our people. Even that song, any mini mighty mo catch a tiger by his toe. The word tiger used to be the N-word. The ice cream song, that's talking about black people. Was it the cutest monkey in the jungle on the shirt? See, it's a history of that. Let's go to verse 41. Thou shalt beget sons and daughters, but thou shalt not enjoy them, for they shall go into captivity. Again, you're going to be sold. And what are these curses? Verse 45 reads, moreover, all these curses shall come upon thee and shall pursue thee and overtake thee till thou be destroyed, because thou hearkenest not unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to keep his commandments and his statutes which he commanded thee. And what are they? Verse 46 reads, and they shall be upon thee for a sign and for a wonder upon thy seed. Well, so when you see the people who built and didn't prosper, who are cursed everywhere they go, who had their wives raped, their children sold. When you see the people, this is verse 68. When you see the people, it says, and it says, and the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt. Egypt represents bondage. Because if you read in Exodus 20, just so you know, because that's where Israel gets their first bondage was at, during the days of Moses. That's why it says in the 10 Commandments in Exodus 22, I am the Lord thy God, which I brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of thy house of bondage. See, that was synonymous with bondage. Egypt was. So it says, and the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships. But Egypt here is just representing captivity in general. So you going in captivity by waiting. You're not going to go into a land, dwell there, and then going to over time be a slave. It says, well, actually, Israel went deep into the interior of Africa, and then the slave trade brought them out by way of ships. I was referring specifically when I said it earlier to how they went in the Goshen. But ultimately, that's what we did after Jerusalem was ransacked. That was our cutoff as a nation, and we went into the interior of Africa, dwelled there amongst the people, even in West Africa and other parts of Africa, and then those people, indigenous to the land, sold us as slaves to these Europeans, and these Europeans took us on ships. Like I'll give you an example. One of the great slave hubs was Yehuda, which means Judah. You look at old maps, you see Judah and all various types of names that mean Israel or Judah, etc. So it says, and the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships, by the way whereof I spake unto thee, thou shalt see it no more again. And there ye shall be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen. So again, this is a curse. You're going to be sold as slaves. You're going to go into slavery by way of slave ships. See, this did not happen to the people who call themselves Jews. And it says, and no man shall buy you, meaning nobody's going to get you out of this situation. Let's go to Deuteronomy, the 21st chapter. Deuteronomy 21. Because he said these are curses that will come upon you. How do you know you're cursed by God? This is Deuteronomy 21 and verse 22. It says that Deuteronomy 21 and 22 reads, and if any man have committed a sin worthy of death, and he be put to death, he be to be put to death, and thou hang him on a tree. His body shall not remain all night upon the tree, but thou shalt in any wise bury him that day, for he that is hanged is accursed of God. You are the accursed of God when you hang on trees. That's the sign of people being cursed by God. Who has been hanging on trees? We have been hanging on trees because we are cursed of God, brothers and sisters. But we've lost who we are. This is Deuteronomy, the 32nd chapter, in verse 26. Deuteronomy in verse 32 and 26, it says, I said I will scatter them into corners. I will make the remembrance of them to cease from among men. We don't have a clue of who we are as a people. That's why we don't, like I said earlier, we come out of these beauty places, and we have these these weaves and wigs with helmets on of other people's hair, like we in disguise. Blonde, contacts, skin bleaching. Go to Jamaica, that's an epidemic of skin bleaching amongst our people. Why? Because we don't know who we are. We've been told we are something else. We've been told that we are closer to animal, closer to primate, inherently wicked as a people in comparison to other people. Less beautiful. Read Thomas Jefferson. Again, I talked about him earlier. One of the most racist pieces of American literature you ever want to read is Notes on Virginia, where he's talking about the beauty of black people compared to white people. We're less intelligent according to him, less beautiful. But see, all that has to take place because you have to justify slavery. You have to justify slavery. But let's go to Leviticus, the 26th chapter. Because, like I said, the title is integrating into a burning house. See, the idea is not, or the answer, brothers and sisters, is not to be firemen when the fire starts. No, it's not to be firemen. It's not to integrate into some heathen, amongst some heathen people who don't know God in order to get out of our situation. I mean, this country is wicked. We need to repair our relationship with our God. That's what we need to do. We shouldn't be worried about integrating with other people. This is Leviticus 26 and verse 32. It reads, and I will bring the land into desolation, and your enemies which dwell therein shall be astonished at it. And I will scatter you among the heathen, and will draw the sword after you, and your land shall be desolate, and your cities waste. See, he said you're going to be dispersed. You're going to be dispersed amongst the heathen. But then he says something in verse 40. It says, if they shall confess their iniquity and the iniquity of their fathers, with their trespass, which they trespassed against me, and that also they have walked contrary to me. So if we acknowledge our sin, then it says, and that I also have walked contrary unto them and have brought them into the land of their enemies. That's what we are. We're trying to integrate with the enemy. It says, if then their uncircumcised hearts be humble, and they then accept of the punishment of their iniquity. See, we acknowledge our wrongdoing. It says, then will I remember my covenant with Jacob, and also my covenant with Isaac, and also my covenant with Abraham will I remember, and I will remember the land. See, this is not the first captivity Israel has experienced as a people. There was captivity in Babylon. There was oppression during the time of the judges. You see, there was oppression at other times. from other nations. And what did the people do? They would call out to God, but it got to a point where there was no remedy. So he cast us out of his land for good. But but he gave us what we need to do. And it's going to happen too. Let's go to 2 Chronicles. Because ultimately we're going to be reestablished as a people. But let's go to 2 Chronicles, the 6th chapter. Because here we see the dedication of the temple, 2 Chronicles 6. And we're going to pick it up at verse 36 because we want to see what Solomon prayed concerning Israel. It says, if they sin against thee, for there is no man which sinneth not, and thou be angry with them. So now this is Solomon talking about if the people sin against God and God becomes angry, and it says, and deliver them over before their enemies. So God put them in that situation. He said, if God puts you in this situation, you got to think about it. You think we suffered all this and God don't know? We still suffering today. And God, what? Somebody said, wait, what God? Where's God? No, God allowed it to happen. He brought these people upon you because why? Because you turned your back on him. So it says, and thou be angry with them and deliver them over before their enemies. And they carried them away captives unto a land far off or near. And that's what we are, into a land of far off. A whole different continent. Here we are in captivity. It says something in verse 37. Yet if they bethink themselves in the land whither they are carried captive, and turn and pray unto thee in the land of their captivity, saying, we have sinned, we have done amiss, and have dealt wickedly. If they return to thee with all their heart and with all their soul in the land of their captivity, whither they have carried them captives, and pray toward their land. He didn't say march on Washington, D.C. He didn't say even pick up arms. He didn't say we're going to do a nonviolent protest. He didn't say any of that. He didn't say we're going to burn down Detroit. He said, man, acknowledge your sin and pray towards Jerusalem. Pray towards where the temple was. Pray to God, acknowledging your sin and turn back to him. So it says, again in verse 38, if they return to thee with all their heart and with all their soul in the land of their captivity, whether they have carried them captives and prayed toward their land which thou gavest unto their fathers, and toward the city which thou hast chosen, and toward thy house which I have built for thy name, then hear thou from the heavens, even from thy dwelling place, their prayer and their supplications, and maintain their cause, and forgive thy people which have sinned against thee. Go right into the 7th chapter, because this prayer was acknowledged. In verse 1 of chapter 7, it says, when Solomon made an end of praying, the fire came down from heaven and consumed the burnt offering and the sacrifices, and the glory of the Lord filled the house. This is at the dedication of the temple. And the priest could not enter into the house of the Lord because the glory of the Lord had filled the house. That is divine confirmation of the prayer and what was going on. In verse 12, 2 Chronicles 7 and verse 12, it says, and the Lord appeared to Solomon by night and said unto him, I have heard thy prayer and have chosen this place to myself for an house of sacrifice. If I shut up heaven and there be no rain, or if I command the locusts to devour the land, or I send pestilence among my people, because that was all a part of that prayer. He said, if my people which are called by my name shall humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven and will forgive their sins and heal their land. That's what he's going to do. You have to turn back to God. Let's go back to Deuteronomy. See, it's not going and begging your enemy for anything. That's not the answer. Deuteronomy give me 1 second. Deuteronomy I want to read. Let's go to Deuteronomy 30. Because, brothers and sisters, ultimately, Israel's going to be restored as a nation. Deuteronomy 30 and verse 1. It reads, and it shall come to pass when all these things are come upon thee, the blessing and the curse. And we've experienced the curse, which I have said before thee, and thou shalt call them to mind among all the nations whither the Lord thy God hath driven thee. Now it's time to call it to mind. You know what? We are the people of the book. You know what? We have sinned against him. You know what? We as a people need to turn back to him in righteousness, in spirit, and in truth. That's how we have to worship him. It says, not according to Christianity. Christianity is a lie. Today's Christianity is a lie. Verse 2, and shall return unto the Lord thy God, and shall obey his voice, according to all that I command thee this day, thou and thy children with all thine heart and with all thy soul. That's what we need to do as a people. What's going to happen if we do that? That then the Lord thy God will turn thy captivity and have compassion upon thee, and will return and gather thee from all the nations whither the Lord thy God hath scattered thee. He's going to gather us into a people, as a people, into a land. He said, if any of thine be driven out unto the outmost parts of heaven, that's talking about on the earth, from thence will the Lord thy God gather thee, and from thence will he fetch thee. And the Lord thy God will bring thee into the land which thy fathers possessed, and thou shalt possess it, and he will do thee good and multiply thee above thy fathers. Then it says, and the Lord thy God will circumcise thine heart. Talked about an uncircumcised heart earlier, but he's going to circumcise the heart. And the heart of thy seed to love the Lord thy God with all thine heart and with all thy soul, that thou mayest live. And the Lord thy God will put all these curses upon thine enemies, and on them that hate thee, which persecuted thee. And thou shalt return and obey the voice of the Lord, and do all his commandments, which I command thee this day. And this is what we need to do. This is what we must do as a people. Not march on Washington. Not taking up arms, none of that. We need to get right with our God and turn back to him and acknowledge our sins, pray toward that place, acknowledge our sins, be obedient as a people. And with that, brothers and sisters, I thank you for your time.